Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome. It's my pleasure and honor to be here with you guys today. And as always, please add your location and your name in the chat. Let's know where you guys coming from today. Gonna give you a couple seconds so everyone can join in on this beautiful day. Okay. Okay, we have Netherlands, California, Iceland, Memphis, Canada, Mexico, Europe, Florida, everywhere again. Colorado, here we go. Georgia, awesome. Okay, now we reach that point that we cannot read anymore.
We're going too
Portugal,
fast.
Scotland, yes. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for once more being here with us. And it's my pleasure to announce the premiere of Soil Food Web School first ever documentary, From Desert to Abundance, Overcoming Monoculture Challenges in a Changing Climate. Today, we are joined by Roberto Silva of Agropiura, Soil Food Web consultant Miles Sorrell of Terraforma, videographer Ashley Terry of Ashley Terry Films, and Dr. Elaine Ingham herself. We'll get right away to the mini doc premiere after a quick introduction from each of our guests. Please, Roberto, introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting us. My name is Roberto Silva. I am a partner at Agropiura. It's a family farm that began 10 years ago in the north of Peru. It's very close to the equator, but it's a desert. And today we are managing the farm in an organic system. And this year we hope to apply for the regenerative agriculture certification.
Thank you, Roberto. Miles, your turn.
Hi, everybody. I'm Miles Sorrell. I'm the CEO of Terraforma, and we work across the world delivering regenerative solutions and applying concepts from the soil food web to all of our projects. We work directly with Roberto on this project, helping him to transition into that regenerative certification. We have projects in the US, as far from Peru to the Philippines, and have worked in a whole bunch of different crops and have really enjoyed the process of trying to bring these types of regenerative practices into the mainstream and turning that focus onto soil microbiology.
Thank you, Miles. Ashley, the word's yours.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm Ashley Terry. I've owned a video production company for about 20 years, started out with wedding and sporting events. I've slowly tailored my client base to include folks like the Soil Food Web School, that I've been working with since 2019. We've had a great working relationship, and they just keep giving me more opportunities and new, unique, creative ways to express my craft, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Ash. It's always good work with you. Now, Dr. Elaine, the floor is yours.
I have to introduce myself to this group? Gee. I'm
Just
Dr.
a quick refresh.
Just a refresher. I'm Dr. Elaine Ingham. I've worked with biology, microorganisms in the soil since, 1981. So yeah, it's been a long and fruitful career, and I've enjoyed all of the meeting all the people, getting to travel, finding out how these organisms in the soil change when they get into different climates and different situations. And so we've only begun to figure out about all of the things that we need to know to keep all of our plants happy and healthy. But we've certainly come a long way in preventing use of inorganic fertilizers, toxic chemicals, preventing the loss of those nutrients from the soil in your agricultural fields. So yeah, it's just every day wakes up with another amazing thing that Mother Nature is up to.
Thank you, Elaine. And I'm Carla Portugal. I'm a mentor and researcher at Dr. Elaine's school. It's been a pleasure to work with her and the whole crew since 2019. but I work with education and environmental science since, oh gosh, without giving the age, since 2001-ish. And I also want to thank you, all the amazing staff we have from the school in the background helping us today. And without further ado, let's start the movie. Have fun.
Piura, it's an area on the northern part of Peru. We are about 500 kilometers south of the equator. It used to be a dry woodland, very delicate ecosystem. And due to overgrazing and using the trees for wood, for cooking, it has become a desert. When we purchased this land, it was overgrazed. It was 98% sand. It's 0.3% of organic matter. Very, very low productivity in that sense. The amount of rain that we get usually, it's about 80 millimeters a year. In 2014, we planted the first 40 hectares of grapes. Everything was going really well the first 2 years. And in 2017, we got hit by El Nino. During El Nino, we got about 300 inches of rain in 45 days. So actually, this whole area was flooded. And after that, something happened with the soil. Salts from the chemicals and the conventional nutritional system did something to the roots of the plants. And after that, in 2018, 2019, the productivity just went down. It's very difficult to have a monoculture and be able to build again the resilience that we had at the first 2 years in the plants. And that's when we started to realize that the conventional system was not giving us that resilience for these extreme weather conditions. So we started like a trial with organic bananas. We thought that was going to be an easier crop to manage. And that's when we started to see big changes on the soil, and in general, the diversity of the system started to show up. So we continued doing research through the web, and I was following Dr. Elaine and the Soil Food Web from my interests on improving the soil and everything that we were seeing in the banana fields. I was thinking of getting into her course, but I wanted a fast-track improvement, so we decided to hire one of their consultants. Terraforma was doing some work in Ecuador, actually in a banana field. We decided to call them. They came right away, and we started the project immediately in 2019.
I've been a consultant for 6 years, working on a number of different crops, and all around the world. We have projects in India, we've worked in Brazil, Mali, in the Philippines, the US, Ecuador, Peru. So, over those 6 years, we've had the opportunity to trial these processes across different landscapes, different crop systems.
We really get the sense that we're making improvements on these farms for the people that are working on them, the owners of the farms, as well as producing healthier, higher quality food, which is something that, it's hard to replace in terms of feeling very good about.
Agropiura was a farm that reached out to us, really struggling to work within a conventional system. They never really were able to recover from that El Nino year. So when I showed up on the farm, it was essentially a sandbox.
The yields were quite low, so we were able to see a very strong turnaround in the yields that we were able to achieve after we started implementing biology back into the fields. We were able to see over 100% yield increases in these areas, and the second year we saw again about 100% yield increase on top of that. So we've been seeing continued increases over time and continued improvements in the field.
En cuanto a crecimiento, tamaño, tipo de racimo, número de racimo, el resultado ha sido bastante positivo. Hemos tenido este año 1 a 2 milímetros más de diámetro de valla, hemos tenido buena elongación de racimo, hemos estado en el peso promedio, igual como un racimo convencional.
When we go to a client's site, what we're typically trying to do is follow up on different trials and practices that we've been working on with their team. So we'll often work with the farmers to build in new ideas or trial new products or different systems. And we implement those slowly over time. So starting with a smaller area where we'll design a trial with their team and give feedback on where we think that things can be done a little bit better or a little bit differently to get the optimal result. In Agropiura specifically, we've done a lot with associative cover plants or cover plants that are underneath the grapevines in order to help fix nitrogen, reduce erosion, build organic matter, increase the fungal biomass through plants that better associate with fungal microorganisms, and really try to get that baked into their system and reduce the fertilizer usage and herbicide usage to a point where it's no longer needed.
Nematodes hit your productivity very hard because they go into the root system, and we were getting not even 8,000 kilos per hectare because of the nematodes. We were able to improve the soils just with cover crops. So using certain cover crops that exudate chemicals that make those nematodes to go away has made quite a big difference, and much cheaper than conventional chemical inputs. That doesn't work because the next year the nematodes become resilient to the chemicals. So at the end of the day, you keep putting chemicals and different chemicals, and every year you still have the problem. And then we found out that sweet potatoes were a wonderful cover crop because they can stay over the trellis permanently. We don't have to prune it or reseeding it. So we can maintain it and manage it basically parallel with the different phenological stages of the grapes. So they are a very good companion crop.
Hoy en día vemos una diferencia grande. Trabajar con el tema de materia orgánica, con bioestimulantes, hemos obtenido una buena masa radicular, tenemos una competencia de nemátodo, todo parte de la relación suelo-planta y raíz. Si no tenemos una buena masa radicular, no vamos a tener un buen follaje y tampoco vamos a tener buena producción. Hay que tener un equilibrio en el tema suelo-planta y producción.
We're also working with cover plants in the roadways, essentially, in order to reduce the amount of dust that's getting kicked up as they're driving through the fields.
Because the tractor goes by and it's cover crop, so there's much less dust. And dust is probably one of the biggest issues we have here because it brings other things. The next challenge was, well, how are we going to prune this? How are we going to manage all these cover crops? And that's when we started looking at different alternatives like sheep.
Sheep help to control the weeds, help to cycle some nutrients that way. It's a kind of a different way and a more regenerative way to control weed pressure instead of using manpower. It definitely helps to reduce chemical usage.
It has been also another wonderful experience. It's added life to the farm. It brings happiness to the people. So now you have cover crops, you have the grapes, and you have the sheep, and they all have to be tied into the management. And that's a trick thing. We have to find the right balance. We collect their manure, which also helps in our compost.
We also continue to make compost and vermicompost with them to amend the fields to create humic acid extracts.
We do all our extracts here, and that has also helped a lot on reducing our costs. Our inputs are coming down. We're finding local inputs. So instead of bringing CO2 from Europe or India or China, we're trying to make the farm produce its own inputs and bring less from outside.
We have the fish hydrolysate, which is a high amino acid, free amino acid product that we can utilize to stimulate microbiology in the soil, as well as utilize foliar for some absorption of different amino acids. We also implement integrated pest management, where we're rearing insects on site that we can release into the fields and that can survive in some of the associative cover plants to help control pests and disease. Some of those main goals that we faced early on were getting rid of herbicides, which we succeeded in, getting rid of fungicide, getting rid of insecticides, which we've managed to do, and then also converting off of synthetic fertilizer, which we're now using zero synthetic fertilizer as well. So we've hit the goals of making this farm 100% organic, and in doing so increasing the yield from 2019 to 2022 by over 200%.
Dividimos por 30 segundos.
We've been able to see very large increases in bacterial biomass going from very low numbers in the hundreds to over 400 micrograms per gram in the soil. The fungal biomass went from being a much smaller percentage, less than the bacteria, to now we have areas with over 1,000 micrograms per gram of fungi in the soil, which has gone a long way to help balance the fungal to bacterial ratio. It's not as though everything is exactly perfect. We do face different problems year on year. Last year we had problems with mealybugs. This year we've come up with solutions to deal with the mealybug issue, but now we have problems with powdery mildew.
So every year there is a challenge, but researching, following the soil food web with Miles, we are able to always find a solution.
Tenemos 3 muestras, probablemente una mezcla de organismos similar de este mismo punto.
They've really dedicated themselves to making this change. And those are the best results that you'll ever see, is when you have somebody you're working with who's very dedicated to the process, who does some of their own research, who encourages their managers to kind of learn on their own, to try new things, and really pushes to wean their way off of chemical implements.
It's not about products, it's about management. So if you don't have the people that understand what they're doing, then it's not going to work. I mean, everybody has to be on board. And that's the challenge, how you get them on board.
A lot of the managers on the farm took quite a bit of convincing. So Roberto and I would do a lot of educational support for the team, trying to help them understand why we're trying to do the things that we're doing, and also helping to design trials and involve the team in a way where they could see directly the result of everything that was happening.
Today, the mindset of the people at the farm, they don't want anything to do with chemicals. I don't have to convince them. Now they convince me of certain things.
Every conventional farmer that makes a shift towards regenerative farming has to go through that process of educating their workers and their managers, learning and failing and learning and failing, and going through that cycle of bringing a program along. You can make improvements to soil health within a standard conventional system. You can make improvements to your workers' health, to the quality of the food in systems where you're still using some synthetic fertilizer, or you're still having some of those chemical tools as backups. It's difficult for farmers to be able to take risk, because one bad year can throw them into financial ruin. They can lose their farms, they can completely go bankrupt. So that's why farmers tend to be more cautious with taking on big changes. And that's something that I completely encourage, right? You don't want to make a huge change and lose the farm or have something go wrong. So it's important to take those experimental steps and really start to move in that right direction.
You don't have to be 100% organic, but at least treat your soil in a nicer way, you know? Give your plant the ability for them to be resilient, for them to be healthier. It's much cheaper, it's much more productive, and it's much more fun, really. We would love to be an example on how large-scale production sites can be organic and can be diverse and very productive and a very good business investment. And it will be nice to see more of this. Bringing Miles and Terraforma and the Soil Food Web on board has been probably one of my happiest and best decisions. I think it's a great thing to have these advisors. They add value, tremendous value to the business. And even though we have already a very good system, we will continue with them because it's a never-ending research. They are part of the team.
I'm sorry, I was talking with you guys, didn't notice that I was muted. What an inspiration. Thank you everyone for this amazing video. I'm so inspired and curious about many things that we can talk about it, but just to refresh some of our instructions. Please make sure that your microphone is off when you're not talking, just to enhance the quality for everyone. And as always, enter your questions for the panelists in the Zoom Q&A session. It's one of the options in the bottom of your Zoom screen. Interact in the chat. I'm loving how you guys are chit-chatting. Please do, but don't forget to send your questions in the chat as well. Okay, so before we start with the main, with the first question, does any of our panelists have anything to say, any comment, any first questions that you want to tackle first?
Allow me just to clarify. I mentioned that the rain we got in 45 days was 300 inches. There was a mistake on the calculation. It's 30 some inches. We got 900 millimeters, but when I did the conversion, I messed up by a factor of 10. It's still 30 some times what we usually get in 1 year. We usually get 1 inch per annum, and we got 36 inches in 45 days. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Is it okay for me to barge in right here?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So when you were bringing in the cover plants, did you have weeds and undesirable plants? Were there anything like that present, and then you managed to replace it with cover crops or cover plants that you put in?
Yes, that's a very good question. At the beginning, we had more weeds, and I call weeds the ones that bring me pests, really. And then slowly we started bringing our own plants. We introduced marigold to suppress the nematodes, and that worked really well. And that helped us to avoid the weed growing. But then we incorporated some weeds that were natural and that they actually fix nitrogen or they bring other benefits. So through a selection process, we keep some natural growing plants as cover crops, but we have introduced basically 3, which is the marigold, the sun hemp, and also the sweet potatoes, which is our main cover crop, really. Once you grow those, basically the weeds are gone.
Yeah, I would just add to that too. I did see a couple questions pop up in the Q&A about the marigold specifically, how that all works. But it's a really great way to be able to rotate that cover plant throughout the fields. It's not as though we're planting that every year in the same location, as a way to kind of function as essentially a trap crop, which can trap those nematodes. And there's a chemical within the root system that then kills the root feeding nematodes. So it's very selective for root feeding nematode species without harming all of those beneficial organisms. And then I also want to highlight that, we trialed a bunch of different plant species. We worked with a lot of native species. Peru is kind of the potato capital of the world in a lot of ways. So sweet potatoes right in line with sort of native options in that area. But Roberto did a lot of work for digging into a number of different potential options. And so we had tried to find and kind of define categories of plants that we felt would provide certain benefits to the field. And then we selected the ones that were best suited for his situation.
Mm-hmm. And actually we combine several cover crops at one time. So sometimes we have sweet potatoes with sun hemp or sweet potatoes with marigold, plus all the natural plants that grow in the soil. So usually we have about 3-4 different plants in the trellises, plus the grapes.
That's really interesting. Wow.
True. How long took you guys to find the best mix of cover plants? How many trials?
We keep trying. I mean, I feel very comfortable with what we have now, especially the nematodes. They're gone. And the sun hemp is helping us to fix nitrogen really well. We also have a local plant growing naturally, which is I think it's it's a type of soybean. And so, I mean, we are very happy with what we have, but we keep trying different plants. We never use cover crops for a cash crop, okay? That's very important. It was very difficult. At one point, we were trying to do both, and it doesn't work. You got to concentrate on your cash crop. It's one thing, and then your cover crop, it's something else. Never try to do a cash crop with your cover crops, at least in my experience. That's really a very important thing to keep in mind. But we still keep introducing new cover crops if we find something, especially if it's local. If it naturally grows, we try it.
And oh, sorry, to expand on that slightly. We designed different trials with Roberto and the team on the ground. So we did go through, I think it was probably at least 3 iterations of different trials where we set up, we have controls, we have replications within the trials. And so we were planting different mixes, different individual plants, and seeing what was going to take the best. We also had to trial what was the best time to plant that cover plant, what was our window for getting it in the ground, which is incredibly important, right? And so we went through a series of different options in order to land on, okay, these mixes seem to do pretty well, and we can plant them at this exact time point, and then we'll get a pretty good result out of that at the same time. So, we want to limit competition. We want to find where we terminate those plants to utilize those resources. And again, as Roberto mentioned, the purpose of this is to be not very extractive. We want all of that to stay in the soil. His soil, as he mentioned, is 98% sand. So there's not a lot to pull out of that, right, in terms of organic matter. So we want to put all of that back in. And so that's been a really big focus from the beginning. Yeah.
This is great. So I think that we can jump into some of the questions we have from the chat. Can I have this slide deck, please? Thank you. Okay, so the first question, okay, I will read the translation. My Spanish is just pretty basic. What are the biggest challenges to switch from conventional to a sustainable organic approach? How do you recommend them to transition? Tirco Rojas.
Okay, from my perspective, the most difficult part at the beginning is to have the team understand what you're doing. We have to understand that conventional education teaches chemical agriculture principles. So when you start telling people you're going to lower your inputs and hoping that your roots are going to fix nitrogen and you're going to get all the needed bacteria and fungi to get a system working, they just don't believe it at the beginning. What's wonderful is that after 2 years and when they see what's happening in nature, they absolutely turn their heads 180 degrees. And now they are advocates, absolutely advocates of the organic processes, of nature. So that's probably the biggest hurdle at the beginning. And then it's a day and everyday learning experience. We keep learning every day. It's just, you have to have an open mind. That's my point of view. Miles?
Yeah, hi, Turco. I think this is a Turco that I've communicated with in the past. So thank you for your question. From our perspective, it is always important to take steps, make things a stepwise function. So if you are conventional, moving into an organic or regenerative system, make sure that you take your time, because switching your whole team from conventional management practices, which are very reactive. So you see a problem and then you have a chemical solution to that problem. It's very immediate and you can turn that around immediately. When you're going to a regenerative organic program, it's very planned. You have to be ahead of your problems. So you're going to find things that you're not really capable of solving the way that you've traditionally solved those problems. So you need to be able to learn that on the go fairly quickly. So having smaller parcels where you start that conversion, you start to pull back from your traditional practices is going to shoot you up that learning curve very quickly. If you do your whole farm all at once, you're potentially setting yourself up for a little bit of a disaster year, right? Because one thing pops up that you weren't expecting, and all of a sudden you're having to face this huge problem, and it's very probable you might not be able to solve that. So we always just recommend taking stepwise approaches to this. It's something we've done with Roberto as well, and most of our clients, is to start in an area where we can see the effect of any individual change we're going to make, and then scale it up from there.
Yeah, and it's very important to start with the soil. I mean, you will see immediate changes, and once you start changing the inputs in the soil, especially if you start helping the microbiology to go forward, that's going to make it much easier. It's very hard on the organic for the pest control. That's probably the most difficult. But the nutrition and the soil microbiology, that's very natural, immediate reaction from changing the inputs.
Elaine, do you want to say something?
Find the mute button first. I'm interested in the fact that you're suggesting that dealing with the insect pests were possibly the hardest thing you had to do. That was the last thing that got fixed, or you're still working on it, is getting those critters to stop eating your bananas or grapes. Sorry, where was mine? Both, all three of those. So, because we are working on understanding those relationships between the growth of your crop and what insect pests you have around, and why is it that the insect pests aren't being affected by the proper biology present in your compost teas and extracts. Because I find it pretty easy to deal with the insects, but I've got, some real specific lineups. Here's what you do for this kind of insect. This is how gone in 2 weeks. And this other group has this particular function. And so we attack at that function where the insect pest is really doesn't have any defense for it. So maybe we need to sit down and go through all of your insect pests, and you'll learn some stuff and I'll learn some stuff, and it should be interesting.
Yes, that will be great. I mean, the first point is that if you have a healthy plant, that's the first objective. I mean, you got to have a plant that is healthy, and we measure we try to summarize the healthiness of the plant by measuring the bricks level at the leaf. So we more or less follow what we've heard on the web, basically, that once you have bricks over 7, 8, 9, you have a more resilient plant. So that's the first step. And to get that, it's basically a good nutrition and very good and diverse microbiology in the soil. So that's, once you have that step, you are very close to having a crop that is resilient to the bugs. But unfortunately, we live in a desert where people have put monoculture. There's more than 7,000 hectares of grapes growing around us, all chemical. So when the neighbors apply, the bugs will look for other crops, and every year we have a different type of bug. It's not always the same one. So problems change, and it's very dynamic year after year, especially in these weather patterns that are never the same. So right now, for example, last year we have problems not with bugs but with the fungi, with mildew. And this year we also have problems with mildew. We're getting humidities that we've never seen before. So the changing weather patterns bring new pests, bring new challenges. And I think that's the issue, really, Elaine. it's that diversity on the problems.
Yep. I'd want to try to put together something where you were looking ahead to all of the indicators of what the next growing season is going to bring you.
We're trying to do that. Yes, we've drawn a pattern between temperature, humidity, and pest pressure, and try to find and the phenological stage of the plant, because that also has to do with the. So we're trying to learn in this phenology of the plant and this weather, we're probably going to get attacked by these type of problems. So that we have to do that. That's definitely one of the objectives.
This is beautiful. It seems that I have a lot of, we need a lot of extra time to talk. So let's schedule and get together, right, Elaine?
Yeah.
Can I have the next question, please? Okay. So Ash, first, there is a bunch of comments for folks saying, congratulations, amazing video. I'm still processing a lot of details and nuances there. So thank you for the amazing work. And what motivated you to take on this documentary?
Yeah, it's my pleasure, really. You know, after working with this school for a while, we've been looking for well over a year at least for something, you know, a bigger driver for this, a better storyline, something different from the usual consultant case studies and webinars that you have, which are all great and very informational and stuff, but maybe something to draw in maybe a larger audience. And so I was eventually contracted, and we looked for a long time to find the right consultant, Miles, and the right farm client, Roberto. So those two together were such the right amalgamation of what a good proof of concept was, that it just seemed like a no-brainer. And I'm very passionate about the work in general, so I'm always trying to make as many concessions as I can while still putting a roof over my head for work like this that I feel like is very important, not just for my community. I happen to live in the same town as Elaine, by the way, funny enough, and but for the globe as well. So it was important to me.
So the following up question, I think it kind of answer, but are you planning to have your own farm after spending this time with Miles and Roberto?
That's a story in its own. My wife is the gardener of our family, and she gets so distraught with the raccoons and the deer and the peacocks. We have bloody peacocks in our yard, eating things and destroying things. So it's been a mess. Gardening is about the extent of it.
Thank you. Can I have the next question, please? Thank you. So this goes to Miles and Roberto. In the video, you mentioned that you use cover plants in the roadways to help reduce dust. Can you explain the problem and solution further? Are the cover plants acting as red row of sorts to block the dust?
Okay.
Yeah, I guess yeah, you can start with this, Roberto.
Yeah, maybe to clarify, we have cover crops in different parts of the farm. So mainly it's in the trellises below the grapes. That was the beginning. That's when we started, because that's our root system. So that's where we wanted to work the diversity. So the first objective of cover crops was biology, diversity, right next to my grapes. The second opportunity that we saw for cover crops, it was dust suppression. And we're talking about the between the trellises, so below the canopy of the grapes, okay? Remember, this is table-grape, so the canopy is throughout the area. And we saw that by putting another hose and drip irrigation in the rows where the tractors go, that will suppress all the dust. So dust was a big issue because with dust you get mites, you get all kinds of problems. And that's our second step. But we also use cover crops for the shoulders of roads on the farm. And also for, we use a lot of herbs for helping bringing more diversity for insect diversity. So cover crops are used for different purposes, no? I don't know what you would like to add, Miles.
Not much. That's pretty extensive. Just as we've evaluated each of these processes in succession of another, we're always looking at what are the potential ups and downsides, what are the trade-offs to each of these practices, and trying to bear in mind, as we reduce dust, are we also reducing temperature, which is a benefit, but then is the relative humidity higher, and is that going to be a problem for fungal pressure? So we're constantly trying to juggle some of those issues and better understand, okay, how do we create the optimal approach? It is a process to develop that land from something where you have no predatory insects, you have a very basic system, into then introducing all of these things, and things kind of, predatory insects come back into that picture sort of after all of their food sources in the picture, which is all of those initial pests. So it is a evolving process where we're constantly evaluating everything.
Beautiful. There is one saying in Brazil that we call farm. Farm in Portuguese is fazenda, coming from always doing something. So it's mean a farm. We're always doing something, right? It's over and over. There is no weekends, holidays, nothing. Can I have the next question, please? Here we go. I'm interested to know how you began the remediation with such extreme lack of organic matter in the sand. Kelly B. Thank you, Kelly.
Go ahead, Miles, it's your process.
Yeah, so with such a low organic matter present, the first step was compost. So, Roberto was originally making his own compost when he contacted us, and we worked with their team to create a much more refined product that he could put into the fields. And then he had also been making a vermicompost as well that we've been able to kind of continue to improve and utilize. Over the years, we've been trying to pump in as much of that into the soil as possible, both as a nutritional source, but also to increase the organic matter right near the root zone of the grapes. So initially, there were about 40 metric tons a hectare going into the soil, I believe. Roberto, correct me if I'm wrong on any of these figures. And then over time, we've scaled that back. So we're at a point now where we're kind of juggling every other year, putting some compost in. But that goes a long way for increasing organic matter in a system like that. And then the cover plants are also a huge feature for increasing organic matter within that system. So between compost and cover plants, we're reintroducing a lot of carbon into that system, and it's able to support the grapes' growth. So, in some of our samples, we've seen the organic matter go from that 0.3% level up towards closer to, 1.3% over the course of the past 2 or 3 years of putting that into the system. But we're continuing to evaluate that process because we want to make sure that organic matter doesn't continue to drop and that it's continuing to go up over time. So that's kind of how we're mediating the usage of how much compost goes into that system and how that balances out.
Yeah, I think that it's very important, the extracts that we put, the fungi extracts, all the extracts that we get from the vermicompost. And we also add a fish hydrolysis that we do at the farm. So, and the cover crops. I mean, those are the three main inputs that will help you with the organic matter on soil. Cover crops, another wonderful thing is that they cover the compost. So what we're seeing is that what we put last year, it's still there. And that's why we've decided this year to lower the input, because we still have compost from last year on the trellises, thanks to the cover crops. So they not only with the exudates, you get more microbiology, and that becomes organic matter, very stable organic matter. But it also covers the compost that we've put on the trellises. So it's a double effect.
Roberto, there is one question in the chat. Do you make your own fish hydrolysate, or you guys use commercial one?
No, we do our own. We're basically trying to do all of our extracts. We're now multiplying also fungi, specific fungi, trichodermas and bacteria also at the farm. The fish hydrolysate, we do it because somebody asked, where do we get the water? And that's a very good question. We get the water from a dam that is 100 kilometers away. So we don't use underground water. We use all water from irrigation. And in that dam, there is a fishery from tilapia. So we buy the leftovers, fresh, really fresh, and we bring it to the farm and do our own fish hydrolysate.
Yeah, I think that highlights an important point surrounding farmer autonomy and the ability to create your own products, which is a huge piece of reducing costs on the farm, right? So if you're capable of making your own sort of fish hydrolysate amendments, your own sort of processes and products, it allows you to break away from being tied down to all of these inputs that are shipped all over the world, and you're having to constantly pay out for those. All that looks different all over the world. So, you know, Roberto has the fortunate positioning to be so close to a fishery where he has access to that type of waste. But in areas where your waste streams change or you need to adapt, there are always ways to be able to produce some form of product like that functions like a microbial stimulant, or that brings in some sort of characteristic that can be a beneficial replacement to any sort of like conventional process that you might have, or can supplement a biological process as well.
Plus, you're in control. You can decide when you're going to do or not. So you don't have to wait for any other source. Awesome. Can I have the next question, please? Thank you. From Fernando. Can you please comment on the closed grape canopy? Do taller grape vines help avoid the sheep eating them?
Excellent question. Yes, that's we have both systems. We have what they call the Spanish system, which is higher, and we have the Californian system, which is what you probably know more in United States. When we have the grapes, we don't put the sheep to graze inside because of sanitation issues. And we do a type of grazing that it's they move in a fence, so they don't stay more than 1 hour under the canopy. They keep moving. So we do a controlled grazing system. When they are eating a little bit of the leaves, I don't mind. When there's fruit, we don't have sheep under the vines.
Miles, do you want to comment something?
No, just that is a good question. You do want to be careful about what animals you use in a mixed system like that. Some of them will eat some of your cash crop if you're not careful. So you do want to evaluate and pick carefully. You know, again, Roberto had evaluated that these sheep were going to be a good option for his farm, and it's worked really well. You know, we've used sheep in other farms as well, but you just got to be careful about what you're putting in there and how they're going to interact with your system.
Never use goats.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to elaborate on that, Roberto?
Goats stand in 2 legs to eat, so they can reach very high levels. Actually, goats were used in pretty much in this area as animal, as a main animal for growing and for raising. And that's why they destroyed the desert, because they eat everything. They eat everything all the way to the height where they can stand in 2 legs. That's why in the desert, you see all the trees that seem to be pruned at about 2 meters. That's because of the goats.
Yeah, they're very non-discriminate.
Yeah.
just wanted to comment because it was so funny. I thought that I noticed that a bunch of people noticed the goats in the opening scenes, and I tried to refrain from using them later on, just when we were setting up the desolation and the overgrazing and stuff like that. I didn't want to confuse anybody with that, but it was just so funny. Those goats on his farm, the way that the neighbor comes through with the goats again. Get off, get out of here. It's just the kind of pest that you have to deal with. It's on another level from the peacocks and deer and stuff that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead, Elaine.
I was just going to comment that, yeah, we have our own version of goats that are called deer.
No.
And I'm putting up a fence right now to deal with it. So I can actually grow vegetables and then eat them.
True. Can I have the next question, please? Here we go. For Miles and Roberto, do you apply the extracts only underneath the leaves?
So this is going to be a little bit of like a nomenclature thing, but yes, we apply extracts only underneath on the actual planting, like where the roots are. What you would refer to as like a foliar spray, that would go into the leaves. So just in terms of like how we do nomenclature, extract is for soil, foliar sprays are for leaves. We do both of those on the farm, but they are slightly different preparations, right? Extract is really focused on taking all of the biology out of the compost, out of that material, and preserving it as the best you can and getting it into the soil as is. A foliar spray is going to involve changing the composition of those microbes over time. So you're adding different stimulants into that mix. And because it's in an aerated system and water, that's going to change the composition. You're going to produce more sugars. It's going to be a slightly different process. So yeah, extracts only soil, foliar sprays only leaves, but there are both happening. Carly, you're muted, I think.
Thank you. Miles continues with seal of approve, correct, Elaine?
Pardon?
Just joking, a bad joke, sorry.
Okay.
Next question, please. Okay. Another El Nino is forecast for this year. So what plans, if any, are you putting in place? Charlie. Thank you, Charlie.
Okay. First, we pray. Actually, the effects of El Nino, of this El Nino that is coming, we already got hit by rain in April. Nobody has spoken about this. It's not El Nino, really, but it was just like an El Nino for us in Peru. We got 15 inches of rain in 1 month in April when we get 0 usually. So that has already taken our fertility on the grapes down. So we already have a negative effect on El Nino, on this weather pattern that will turn into El Nino probably at the end of the year. What we've done is we've advanced as much as we can the harvest so that we harvest before December. We expect El Nino usually comes, the rains come in January or February. So we hope to harvest before that. And once we harvest, because of the cover crops and because of all the, we don't use any more chemicals, I'm not worried about the root system. So the rain is welcome, but these huge rains that are every 5 years or so, and every time it's more often, bring different problems. I mean, we really don't know what's going to happen now, but for example, now we have mildew. We never used to have mildew. We have this fertility issue, which is because of the rain that we got in April. But yeah, it's weather is changing, and every time it's more radical and it's more often. So we have to confront it somehow.
Yeah, definitely. And in terms of the the general preparation. I mean, again, he's been doing this for 3 years with building soil health and putting things in place to reduce erosion and be able to filter through water and reduce stagnant water pooling, all that sort of preparation through 3 years of building this since the last large rain event, or 5 years actually since the last large rain event. So, you know, there has been a lot of preparation done in that regard. But yeah, there are some things in farming that are always out of your control. It's either sometimes too dry or it's going to be too wet. And it might not be at the right time for when you want those conditions or don't want those conditions. So you just have to try to mitigate risk as much as possible to the best of your ability. And so that's kind of where Roberto has been working on. And a lot of that is, you know, I know he's been working to improve his detection and sort of supervision of the fields to get more data that's useful for decision making. And that's a really big piece of that. If you know it's going to be wet and humid, you have to be really careful in grapes, particularly about how you trim those grapes, the spacing of the grapes, you know, how many vines are you going to keep, selecting which vines that are that have germinated are you going to propagate. There's a lot of different factors involved on the management side as well that are really important for just, you know, generally running a farm and making those decisions in a regenerative organic system.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay, for Roberto and Miles, can you talk a little more about water management in your area? From Antonio. Thank you, Antonio.
Yes, okay. As I said, the water comes through the irrigation channels that are built by the government and from a dam that is about 80-100 kilometers away. So we get, because of the type of crop that we have, we get a number of cubic meters allowed for us to use. And our objective is always to try to use the least amount possible. At the beginning, we thought that cover crops were going to consume more water. That's what the people of the farm thought. We haven't noticed that. On the contrary, I think that it helps you to keep the humidity on the soil much longer. And we do everything through deep irrigation, no? So it's a control system in that sense. We know how much water we're putting in and we measure that.
Miles, do you want to say something?
Not much to add on there, just that, yeah, it's usually a bit of a misconception that cover plants are going to use more water. We've done tests in other areas with similar results where you end up using much less water total because of the cooling of the soil surface and the reduction in evaporation of water off that surface as well.
Okay, we have one more question. Let's fit this in the last couple minutes we have. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay. As you increase biodiversity, is there more bird pressure or other pests pressure? Linda. Thank you, Linda.
There is much more birds, but birds eat a lot of insects. So birds, actually, people always think birds are going to eat the grapes, okay? I don't lose more than 1.5% on birds on eating grapes. But they eat thousands of insects. I mean, you can see them in the afternoon, how they are just having fun eating insects. And we see more diversity of birds. One of the fun things we do at the farm, we do bird watching, and we are doing a catalog of all the birds that we're seeing. And we have an increased amount of diversity on the birds, and I think on the volume of them also. And I haven't seen any more loss or pressure on the grapes because of the birds. I have neighbors that put mesh on top of more than 1,000 hectares with mesh. It's really nuts, and I don't see that pressure on birds. Yes, I lose some of it, but it's very little. It's less than 2%. So on the bird issue, I don't, and on the other bugs, on the contrary, I get more beneficial bugs because of the cover crops. And it's unbelievable the diversity of bugs that you get with once you put flowers and other crops under the grapes. So it has been really good, the cover crops on that sense also, on bringing that diversity. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I knew Roberto was going to like that question. Coming in, he's been taking pictures of all of the insects and birds that come in through the farm. But I would say generally biodiversity across the board is a good thing. Usually insects that are going to cause you problems are like a specific type of insect. It's not a diverse group of them. So the broader diversity you get, the more likely you're going to have predators in that system that are going to consume your pest insects. So generally speaking, greater biodiversity is only going to help most of the time. You do have a lot of people get worried about, you know, if I do this, then I'm going to have these things that are considered pests. Or even when you look at like native species that grow, a lot of people consider weeds that maybe I would look at and say, well, you know, that might not be a weed in the way you think. You know, we could maybe use that to our advantage. It's really important to kind of try to build that into the system, I think, and be able to include all of those natural control mechanisms that come along with that. And I think Roberto made a really good point is, you know, sometimes you look at something, you see a bird eat a grape and you go, oh, they're eating my grapes, I need to stop this. But if you do the math on it and you look at it, it's what's the opportunity cost of that, right? He gets free insect control and he gives up a small percentage of grapes every year for it. So, you know, doing that kind of calculative, like ecosystem math, I guess you could call it, is an important factor for making some of those decisions. So yeah, it's really nice to see all of that come back. And I think it's an important piece and demonstration of a kind of not direct benefit that you get from doing this type of practice.
Beautiful. It's a nice payment, right? Lose just less than 2% of your grapes, have a free control of your bugs is a win-win.
What's the price tag on a consultant?
True.
How many insect pests do they eat?
True.
I eat a lot less, yeah.
But the other benefits, good trade.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So now is that time. We are past the hour. I would ask everyone to say your final message for the day. What else do you want to include in the conversation for today? Roberto, let's go with you first.
I want to thank especially the Soil Food Web because thanks to them, I opened a new door on agriculture for me, and it has been wonderful. And the way that it's working, that they teach a special groups of people that become your technicians or your advisors, it works really well. I mean, it's a quick, cheap way of really improving your farm, your outputs, and especially the organic point of growing something, that I think is the way to go. I mean, I don't think that chemical agriculture it has to end somehow, and this is a really good channel to implement that change, no? So I encourage all the farmers to try it. They don't have to turn the whole farm. They can start with a little lot and then see if they like it and go forward.
True. Miles?
Yeah, I would kind of second Roberto's message. You know, farming is a spectrum in terms of where people stand on a conventional versus regenerative standpoint. And I'd love to have more growers have Roberto's mentality of really pushing to reach the kind of pinnacle of a regenerative process within even a monoculture system. But even if you aren't, you know, fully regenerative or organic, if you are conventional, there are steps you can take to improve your practices, to limit chemical usage, to reduce that fertilizer usage, to start rely on more natural mechanisms, and generally just do better in building the health of your farm, your soil, the ecosystem. And you don't have to be fully regenerative to do that. You can take smaller steps along the way, and it's a really good place to start. And you can reap the benefits of doing that. The earth can reap the benefits of doing that. And it's kind of all around a win-win if we can at least even incorporate those couple of steps in those bigger systems. But, you know, if we can get more people into Roberto's mindset, that would be even better. Yeah.
True. Ash?
Thanks. Yeah, as I said, I appreciated the opportunity to work with, again, with the SOA Food Web School and both of these two. I didn't serve in the military or anything like that, but based on what I hear from my grandpa and stuff like that, when you're in the trenches with somebody, that's kind of how I feel. How I felt on the Peru shoot. It was such an in-depth experience to be there on the farm with everybody and see all the processes, and just, this was all shot in 3 days, by the way. So it was just a whirlwind trip for me, very emotional, and again, just a great experience. So, and this is not to throw spoilers out there, but this is just the first of the mini docs for SOA Food Web School. So stay tuned for more.
So can we include the next visit on Roberto's farm to bird watching?
You're welcome.
The diversity.
He's got a great book of birds and insects already there on his farm. Just
Beautiful.
visit and take the tour.
Yeah. What all do they all eat? And so get the whole ecosystem effect. Do you have the information necessary to put this together in a financial way where you could be able to say to somebody that because you put cover plants out, you were getting this reduction, you didn't have this problem, and therefore we put out, you know, $20 per acre for the cover crop seed, and we got the benefit of what they do, and so that you didn't have to buy $240 worth of pesticide can you put it all together? Because that's a lot of what convinces growers to try and get them to try in a small area, and then it grows larger and larger, and what we have to do is sneak up on big industry and while they're not looking, take over their land.
Yeah, just a note on that, so that everybody knows, within our inputs, our NPK inputs have lowered about 30% throughout the board for every lot on average. On the costs, it's at the beginning, you might be a little bit higher the first year because you are putting all this compost, and that's basically why, because of the compost. But once you reach a stable system, I expect even lower cost than chemical inputs, especially now with the high rise of costs on chemical inputs. We're getting a lower cost on organic inputs than chemical inputs. Our costs are lower on inputs, okay? Certain things go up, but in general, the whole cost we expect to be lower in organic than in conventional chemical.
So it seems that we have another webinar ahead of us pretty soon. Once more, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I had a blast. I hope you did as well. Keep tuned on our YouTube. This session will be there probably next week. So once more, thank you. And if you have any questions, you can reach out the consultants on the school website. You can reach out in all the staff in the school. Thank you so much, and see you guys soon. Have a great week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Great job. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Don't forget to click that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell to stay updated with all our new videos.